The 1986 film Peggy Sue Got Married stars Kathleen Turner playing as Peggy Sue on the verge to divorcing her high school sweetheart, Charlie, played by Nicolas Cage. On the night of their 25th high school reunion, Peggy Sue gets transported back to her senior year in 1960 and must avoid making the same mistake of marrying Charlie. So while I was watching this, I was reminded of a film called 13 Going on 30. Is it just me, or do these two have similar plots? Anyways, the film is brought to you by the man that directed The Outsiders, Apocalypse Now, and The Godfather trilogy, Francis Ford Coppola. And to be honest, I was surprised when I saw his name in the opening credits. I don't know, I can't see him directing a high school romance. Either way, Coppola delivers a very solid film that makes you question your past, future, and everything in between. The film was nominated for 3 Oscars: Best Actress, Best Cinematography, and Best Costume Design. Does this film feel like a nominated movie? Well, if I have to be honest, not really. Now, don't get me wrong, I like this film a lot, but that same year, Stand By Me, Big Trouble in Little China, and Labyrinth came out, and you don't see those getting nominated. Not that nominations should decide whether one movie is superior than the other movie, but that's just my opinion. I found this movie to be a fun, enjoyable high school romance. A majority of the film takes place in the 60s, so you get the retro outfits, old cars, and awesome rockabilly songs. The characters are interesting, to say the least. During the film, I kept having mixed feelings about them. At points, I understood where they were coming from, but other times it got a little frustrating. Every time you think you like them, they do something to make you feel the opposite way towards them. One thing I did find really cool was that if you notice, Peggy and Charlie seem to switch roles. In the present time, Peggy Sue mentions that Charlie cheated on her, and later when she goes back in time, Peggy ends up cheating with some guy and Charlie is heartbroken. By the way, I found this scene to be funny, and it's all because of Cage's performance. His mannerisms are hilarious. I know it's supposed to be dramatic, but it takes a darker tone that felt a little unexpected, and Cage's acting here makes it more comedic rather than serious. Not to say that he's bad, he actually does a really good job here. He's not necessarily over the top in a bad way, and you can sympathize for him at moments, even if I found his voice to be funny. Also, am I the only one who thinks he bears a small resemblance to Ryan Gosling? As for Kathleen Turner, she's a good Peggy Sue. Like I mentioned, her character can get a bit frustrating, but it works because we as the audience can't decide whether she should leave Charlie or stay with him. This film also has an early Jim Carrey playing Walter. You don't really get to see him that much, even though they put him on the cover for the VHS. And whenever you do see him, it's Jim Carrey being Jim Carrey. My favorite aspect of this movie is the idea of traveling back to your high school days. It makes you question yourself. If you can relive your high school days, is there something you'd change, or would you let everything happen the way it did? One last thing to mention is Coppola's directing. From the very first shot, you get an awesome camera coming out of the mirror trick, which was really trippy to look at. At first, I thought that's how Peggy Sue went back in time, through the mirror, kind of like Alice through the looking glass. Other than that, I really like how he developed his characters and his stylistic choices. As for problems, the second act felt a little too slow. I wish the movie decided to have a little more fun with the characters and its setting. There was also one scene in the library where a character asks Peggy Sue to marry her, and it felt out of place. It came out of nowhere. Overall, Peggy Sue Got Married delivers a thoughtful, engaging, funny time travel romance with some nitpicky issues. I'm gonna give the film 8 out of 10 cages. By now, you may know that Francis Ford Coppola directed the film. What you may not know is that Coppola casted his nephew as Charlie. That's right, I'm talking about Nicolas Cage. Coppola also casted his daughter, Sofia Coppola, to play Peggy Sue's little sister. Bonus fact, Kathleen Turner plays Sofia Coppola's older sister. 13 years later, Sofia Coppola casts Kathleen Turner in The Virgin Suicides. Nicolas Cage based Charlie's voice on Pokey from The Gumby Show. Coppola hated the voice, and because of this, Cage nearly lost the role. Eventually, Cage was able to convince Coppola that he was making a good choice. What do you think? Helen Hunt, who plays Peggy Sue and Charlie's daughter, is 9 years younger than the actress who played Peggy Sue, Kathleen Turner, and 1 year older than her on-screen father, Nicolas Cage. Deborah Winger was almost casted as Peggy Sue, but suffered a back injury after a bicycle accident that forced her to withdraw from the role. During production, Kathleen Turner would intensely feel the role of Peggy Sue. Because of this, she started having nightmares about her dead grandmother calling her on the phone, similar to what Peggy felt when she first interacts with her grandmother. Before Nicolas Cage, Steve Guttenberg was considered for playing the role of Charlie. However, Guttenberg spent a majority of his audition time questioning Francis Ford Coppola about the making of The Godfather. But can you really blame the guy? I'd honestly do the same. The opening shot of the film wasn't filmed through a mirror because then you'd be able to see the camera and crew. Instead, they created an optical illusion. It was done practically using body doubles for Turner and Helen Hunt. When Deborah Winger was casted for Peggy Sue, she asked Penny Marshall to direct. After a meeting with Tom Hanks and Sean Penn to play Charlie, she was fired because the studios felt the film was too big for a first-time director. She later went on to direct Big, starring Tom Hanks. When Peggy is named Queen at the high school reunion, Marshall Crenshaw starts singing Buddy Holly's hit, Peggy Sue. A year later, Crenshaw played Buddy Holly in La Bamba.
Besides, the sky belongs to the stars, right?
And that's all the facts we have this week. I hope you enjoyed today's video, and today's the last Friday of September. You know what that means. It's time to get spooky! I don't think I'm going to review these.